In the kingdom of Zuwara, the earth itself seemed split between paradise and punishment. To the east, lush oases shimmered with palm groves and pools of glassy water where herons drifted like pale ghosts. To the west, the golden desert began, a vast, burning sea of dunes that devoured the horizon. Between these two worlds lived the people of Zuwara, proud and cautious, forever aware that beauty and death were never far apart. Among them walked Amina, the healer. She was only 25, but her name was spoken with reverence even in distant villages. She had been born on a night when the desert winds sang louder than the drums, and some said the spirits had chosen her before her first breath. Her hands could quiet a fever, her herbs could draw poison from blood, and when she closed her eyes and pressed her palms to the sand, she claimed she could hear the earth breathe. The people believed her. The queen did not. Mother Nyara, wife of the aging King Kondo, had long held the kingdom's loyalty through her priests, her rituals, and her jeweled authority. But the queen's power was of the palace, polished and cold. Amina's was of the soil, wild and living. The more the people sought the young healer's blessing, the more Nyara's envy curdled into fear. It began the night the king's breath faltered. No priest's prayer could wake him. For 3 days the queen fasted and burned incense until the walls themselves smelled of grief. On the 4th night, when the royal court had grown silent with despair, Amina appeared at the palace gates with a small pouch of crushed desert leaves. "She brings witchcraft," hissed one guard. "She brings hope," said another. Without permission, Amina entered the king's chamber. She knelt beside his still body, pressed the herbs to his tongue, and whispered in a language the court did not know. When dawn came, the king stirred. His eyes fluttered open, his breath returned. And though his voice was weak, he whispered one name, Amina. The people rejoiced. The drums beat from the markets to the palace steps. They carried gifts to the healer's hut. Baskets of fruit, carved wooden charms, coins bright as suns. But in the high tower, the queen watched from her lattice window, her hands trembling around a cup of wine. That night she summoned her priests. She used forbidden tongues, they told her. She called upon desert spirits. "Then she will answer for it," the queen said. By morning the royal guards stormed Amina's home. They overturned her bowls of herbs, scattered her sacred stones, and dragged her through the streets while the villagers cried out. Before the palace gates, the queen stood robed in white and gold, her crown glinting like fire. "Amina of the wind," she proclaimed, "you have trespassed upon the realm of spirits. You have deceived the people and insulted the gods. For this, the law of Zuwara is exile." Amina lifted her gaze to the sky, calm even as the guards bound her wrists. "If I am guilty for healing," she said softly, "then may the desert itself be my witness." The queen's eyes flickered, perhaps with doubt, perhaps with fury. "Let the sand swallow her truth," she ordered. So at sunset, barefoot and alone, Amina was led beyond the last palm tree where the dunes began. They gave her only a small gourd of water and her drum, the one carved by her mother long ago. She turned once to look at her people. Many wept, but none dared speak. As the wind rose, the queen's banner snapped like a whip. Amina faced the desert. The first gust struck her cheeks, dry and hot as breath. She began to walk, leaving behind a trail of footprints that the wind quickly erased. Behind her, voices murmured among the villagers. "No one returns from the sands of Coma," they whispered. But far ahead, where the horizon burned red, the dunes seemed to shimmer with something alive, something listening. The desert stretched endlessly before her, an ocean of gold without shore or mercy. The sun sat high and merciless, burning through her eyelids even when she shut them. Each step sank her deeper into the shifting dunes until the world seemed to move beneath her, breathing like a living thing. Her lips cracked, her throat felt made of dust, yet she walked on, one foot in front of the other, her drum slung across her back and her small gourd of water pressed to her chest as if it carried her soul inside. When the first night came, it came suddenly, like the falling of a heavy curtain. The heat fled, replaced by cold so sharp it sliced through her bones. She wrapped her arms around herself and sat beneath a slanted dune, watching the stars appear, thousands of them, trembling like watchful eyes. In their light, the desert was no longer gold but silver and blue, endless ripples frozen in stillness. Amina closed her eyes. The silence pressed upon her ears, thick and absolute. But within it, faintly, she thought she heard something, like breath moving through hollow reeds. She listened harder. It was gone. Sleep came in fragments, broken by memory. She saw herself as a child again, crouched beside her mother near the edge of the desert, both of them kneeling in the sand. Her mother's voice floated soft as wind. "Listen," she had said, pressing a hand against the earth. The sand keeps the secrets of those who walk before us. If you listen with respect, it will answer. What does it say, Mama? It says what we forget to remember, her mother whispered. It speaks of those lost, and sometimes it warns the living. When Amina awoke, the memory lingered like warmth from a dream. The morning sun glared against the dunes, cruel and bright. She stood, brushed the sand from her face and walked again. Her water was almost gone. The wind shifted. Something within it seemed to hum. At first she thought it was the echo of her own footsteps. But the sound grew, soft, layered, like many voices whispering beneath the surface of the world. She froze. The wind brushed her ears and faintly she caught her name. Amina. She spun around. There was no one. Only the empty dunes rolling endlessly, glittering like powdered fire. The air grew still. She pressed her hands to the sand. It was hot, pulsing faintly as if a slow heart beat beneath it. Her mother's words came back to her. If you listen with respect, it will answer. So she listened. The whispers deepened. They came like the rustle of hidden waters, like voices speaking through time. She could not understand the words, but she felt their meaning. Loneliness, memory, the ache of those forgotten. These were the ancestors of the sand, the ones who had perished wandering the desert, their bones now the dust that moved beneath her feet. A wind rose from nowhere, lifting the sand in swirls that danced around her ankles. The whispers grew frantic, warning, urging. She looked up. The horizon darkened. The storm was coming. The sky turned the color of tarnished copper, the wind screaming louder, faster, until the dunes themselves began to move. Sand cut at her skin, filled her mouth, stung her eyes. She stumbled forward, searching for shelter. In the chaos she saw a hollow between two massive dunes, a wound in the earth. She threw herself inside, curling against the slope as the storm howled above. 4 hours it raged. The desert became a roaring sea. But beneath the storm's voice, Amina heard something new, something intimate and tender. It was her name again, carried through the grinding of the sand. Amina. Not cruel, not mocking. Calling. Comforting. She closed her eyes and whispered back, her voice trembling, I am here. The storm eased, slowly, like an angry god falling asleep. The wind softened and the silence returned, but now it was not empty. It felt alive, filled with unseen company. When Amina crawled from the hollow, the world had changed. The dunes shimmered faintly as if coated in glass, and the air smelled faintly of sweetness, water. The whispers rose once more, gentle now, flowing like a song. She followed their rhythm across the sand. Her bare feet burned, but her heart felt lighter, guided by something older than fear. As the sun sank low, she saw it, a faint glimmer ahead, hidden between the dunes. Palm trees swayed and a pool reflected the sky like a mirror. The desert had led her to an oasis, secret and untouched. She fell to her knees at its edge, cupped water to her lips, and for the first time since exile she smiled. The desert, it seemed, had not banished her. It had welcomed her home. The oasis waited like a mirage that refused to vanish. At first Amina thought her thirst had conjured it, the green shimmer of palms, the mirror of water that blinked and wavered in the heat. But as she drew nearer, the scent of moisture filled her nostrils. Reeds, dust, and something old, something that had once lived. She stumbled into the shadow of a tall date palm and dropped to her knees beside the pool. Her reflection looked back at her, lips cracked, eyes hollow, skin the color of sun-baked earth. She cupped the water and drank. It was warm but sweet, tasting faintly of salt and memory. When she raised her head, she saw that the oasis was not empty. All around the pool lay the remnants of a village half buried in sand. Stone huts crouched under dunes that had crept through their roofs, their doors gaping like open mouths. Broken pots and woven mats peeked from beneath the dust, hints of laughter that had long since died. There were carvings on the stones too, faces, animals, and symbols of rain. She touched one and felt the faint hum of something sacred. As twilight deepened, the palms swayed and the air cooled. Amina lit a small fire from fallen branches and sat before it, her drum beside her, the pool glimmering softly under the stars. Exhaustion pressed heavy upon her, and soon her eyelids sank. In sleep the silence changed. The pool rippled though there was no wind. The water turned gold, and within it appeared the face she had not seen in years, her mother's. She was smiling, her hair wrapped in white cloth that shimmered like moonlight. "Child of the dunes," the spirit said, her voice both near and far, "you have not been cast away. The desert does not kill the pure, it remembers them." Amina felt tears sting her eyes. "Remember? I was sent here to die. Her mother's image leaned closer, her features trembling like reflections on broken glass. Every grain of sand is a story. Every wind that passes carries the breath of one who once lived. The jealous forget, the cruel silence, but the desert keeps what the world discards. Listen to it, daughter. It will teach you what the living have lost. The water darkened again, and the dream faded into the whisper of leaves. When she awoke, the sun was low and soft, and her body no longer ached as before. She felt steadier, as if the desert had settled inside her. She explored the ruins that day, tracing her fingers over worn stone and faded murals. She found a broken clay pot and used it to fetch water, a rusted knife half buried in sand that she cleaned and kept. Each night she built her fire anew and drummed gently to the rhythm of the wind. Her song had no words, only the pulse of breath and heartbeat. The wind answered, whispering around her fire, stirring the sand like an audience leaning closer. Days became weeks, marked by the arc of the sun and the rise of constellations. She learned to fish tiny silver creatures from the pool with sharpened reeds, to gather herbs that sprouted between stones, and to shade herself in the hollow of the largest hut. The desert began to feel less like a punishment and more like an enormous, living temple. At dusk, when the horizon blushed red, she would stand barefoot and let the sand slide between her toes. The whispers came clearer now, not the harsh roar of storms but the gentle murmur of many voices. Some called her name. Others murmured words she did not yet know. But she understood the tone: gratitude, sorrow, remembrance. One night the wind came warm and slow, heavy with the scent of ancient rain. Amina closed her eyes and listened deeply. The voices changed, they began to form names, spoken with reverence and pain. She heard the name of a queen who had been overthrown by her own counsel, a healer who had been burned for her knowledge, a slave who had died defending her child. The names kept coming, hundreds of them, whispered and carried from every direction until the air itself seemed full of souls. She fell to her knees and pressed her palms to the earth. The sand trembled faintly beneath her touch, alive and aware. Then she knew what her mother's spirit had meant. This desert was no wasteland, it was a graveyard of the forgotten, a sanctuary for those erased by cruelty and greed. Their bodies had turned to dust, but their voices remained, stitched into the breath of the wind, into the pulse of the dunes. Amina bowed her head. "I will listen," she whispered. "I will not let you fade." The fire beside her flared higher, its flames bending toward her like a vow returned. And when she looked into the dark water of the pool, she thought she saw, for an instant, the faces of the lost reflected there, smiling faintly as if they had been waiting for her all along. At first, the dreams came softly, like a song half remembered. Amina would lie beside her fire, the stars wheeling overhead, and the desert's breath would lull her into sleep. But in those dreams she was never alone. Shadows began to gather at the edge of her vision, forming into figures made of sand and light, faces neither living nor dead. They spoke in voices like wind through hollow reeds, thin, mournful, and endless. Each spirit carried a memory, and one by one, they began to share their stories with her. The first was a woman draped in torn silks, her wrists still bearing the marks of gold that had once bound them. She said her name was Queen Sephu, betrayed by her own council who had feared her wisdom. "They buried me beneath their lies," she whispered. "But the sand remembered my crown." Next came a man whose back shimmered with the scars of lashes, his voice as deep as thunder. "I was a builder," he told her. "I raised their palaces. When I asked for freedom, they fed me to the desert." His eyes, made of flame, burned not with hatred but with sorrow. Then came others, a healer accused of heresy for curing what priests could not, a young mother cast out for birthing a child beneath an unlucky moon, a soldier whose loyalty was rewarded with a blade. Each story wove itself around Amina like a web of lament. She listened, night after night, never interrupting, only nodding, her heart heavy with their grief. When she woke each morning, their words lingered in her chest like echoes she could not exhale. The air around the oasis seemed thicker, alive with unseen presence. Even the pool rippled without wind, and sometimes her reflection would blink when she did not. One night, unable to bear the weight of so many unspoken sorrows, Amina reached for her drum. She placed it on her lap, the smooth skin gleaming in the firelight, and began to play. Slowly at first, a single heartbeat, steady and low. Then faster, following a rhythm that rose unbidden from memory. Her palms struck and lifted, until the air vibrated with sound. And something happened. The voices responded. The wind joined her rhythm, swirling the sand into patterns that glowed faintly blue. The whispers that once came in fragments now gathered into a chorus, their tones matching her drumming, weaving into melody. The music was unlike anything she had ever heard, neither human nor divine, but something between. It was grief and beauty, life and death, blending together. Her heart pounded with the beat, tears streaming down her face. She understood then that the desert had not cursed her, it had chosen her. Through her the dead could speak again. From that night on, Amina played for them. She drummed at dawn and dusk, sometimes softly, sometimes with fierce abandon, her hands blistered but unrelenting. Each beat seemed to open the desert wider, releasing stories buried for centuries. The dunes shifted with her rhythm, the palms swayed though there was no breeze. And the songs traveled. Carried by the wind, they crossed miles of empty sand, reaching the borders of Zuwara. On quiet nights, villagers began to hear strange melodies in the distance, low and sorrowful, rising and falling like the sea. They said it sounded like drums made of wind and bone, and some claimed to hear faint words within the music. A farmer in the western plains swore he heard his dead mother's name whispered through the night air. A trader passing through the southern gate said he dreamed of a woman's voice calling his sins aloud. Fear grew in the hearts of the guilty. The queen's priests warned that the desert had become haunted, that the woman they had banished had turned witch and made a covenant with the restless dead. But others whispered a different story, that the healer had become the desert's voice, and that the sand now judged what the courts had refused to see. As the weeks passed, the songs grew louder. Travelers began avoiding the dunes at night, for those who camped too close claimed to hear the wind whispering their secrets. The desert calls by name, they said in trembling tones. And when it speaks yours, you do not sleep again. Back in the oasis, Amina sat beneath the moon, her hands still on the drum, her eyes closed. The whispers hummed around her like 1,000 heartbeats. She felt neither fear nor loneliness now, only purpose. With every beat she gave the voiceless a tongue. With every breath she stitched the forgotten back into the world. And somewhere beyond the dunes, in the kingdom that had cast her out, the guilty woke from dreams of sand filling their throats, hearing her voice echo softly in their ears. Mina, Mina. In Zuwara, the kingdom that once glittered with trade and laughter, unease had begun to settle like dust upon every roof and every heart. It started quietly, an odd wind that rose each night from the western dunes, carrying a strange hum, a sound too rhythmic to be nature. The guards on the palace wall said it sounded like distant drums. The priest said it was nothing but trickery of the night. Yet the people knew better. They had heard that sound before, the slow, pulsing rhythm that once echoed from Amina's hands when she healed the sick and sang to the earth. By the second moon the wind came every night. It blew through the narrow alleys and across the riverbanks, rattling windows and whispering names and voices that seemed both human and not. People began to wake drenched in sweat, certain that the wind had spoken to them, calling softly, Amina? The Queen Mother Nyara could not sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she dreamt of sand creeping through the cracks of her palace. Fine, golden grains seeping beneath doors, coating the marble floors, rising inch by inch until her jeweled throne was half buried. She dreamt of her mirrors turning to dunes and of her crown sinking into dust. She would wake choking, convinced that the desert had entered her lungs. Her servants whispered among themselves that she had grown thin, her beauty hollowed out by fear. She lashed out more fiercely than ever, ordering new rituals of protection, burning barrels of incense until the corridors reeked of smoke. But nothing could keep the wind away. Even the king, once proud and strong, had begun to wither. His recovery after Amina's exile had not lasted. Now he coughed constantly, his skin ashen, his eyes clouded. He called for the healer, forgetting in his fever that she had been banished. When the queen reminded him, his gaze turned distant. She saved me once, he murmured. Perhaps the desert was more merciful than we. Mother Nyara pretended not to hear him. Yet the words lodged like thorns beneath her skin. Outside the palace, the fields that bordered the oases began to fail. The rains, once dependable, came late and weak. The crops shriveled under relentless heat, and the ground cracked open. The priests blamed the winds from the desert, calling them the breath of the dead. But the farmers, those who remembered Amina's kindness, whispered another truth, that the land itself grieved for her. At night, people gathered at the edge of town where the wind's voice was strongest. They brought drums, flutes, and candles, standing together under the starlight. They did not speak loudly for fear of soldiers, but their faces glowed with something between hope and sorrow. When the wind rose, they tilted their heads and listened. Amina, it sighed through the palms. And softly they whispered back, Amina. The gatherings grew with each passing week. Mothers brought their sick children, laying them on mats and praying to the wind. Old men who once had mocked her now beat their drums in rhythm with the faint pulse that drifted from the dunes. It was said that the desert answered them, that the air itself seemed to throb when her name was spoken with faith. But word of these meetings soon reached the palace. The queen was furious. "They summon her as if she were a saint," she hissed to her priests. "They forget their queen while worshipping a ghost." The high priest, fearful but cunning, bowed deeply. "Then let us curse the desert, your majesty. Seal it off so none may approach. Let every road west of Zuwara be forbidden ground." And so it was proclaimed. From the city gates to the outer settlements, guards were stationed. Anyone found traveling toward the desert would be punished. The priests walked through the streets sprinkling ash and chanting prayers to drive away the haunting. They told the people that the wind carried madness, that the whisper was not Amina's voice but the devil's. Yet no decree could silence what was older than kings. That night, as the moon rose swollen and pale, the winds returned stronger than ever. They howled through the palm groves, rattled the banners, and pressed against every door in Zuwara. The torches in the palace courtyard blew out, one by one. The queen sat awake, her jewels glinting faintly in the dark, her hands trembling around her scepter. Then she heard it, clearer than before, inside her chambers. A voice not from outside but within the walls themselves, soft and sure. "Mina." Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "Mina." The curtains stirred though no window was open. A trickle of sand fell from the ceiling, scattering across her bed. She leapt up, staring at the golden grains gleaming against the silk. More fell, whispering as they slid across the floor. Somewhere deep within the palace, the sound of drums echoed, slow, steady, relentless. The queen clutched her chest, backing toward the door, but the air itself felt heavy, humming with that single name that refused to die. Outside, the people were already awake, standing in their courtyards, their faces turned toward the desert where the wind now roared like the sea. And above it all, carried across the miles of darkened sand, came the voice of the one they had cast out, rising, falling, unbroken. "Mina. Mina." The kingdom trembled, and even the stones seemed to listen. "You said 6. The pilgrims of the dunes, 700 words, a group of villagers, led by an old friend of Amina's, Bako the drummer. Bako the old drummer, was the first to speak of going into the desert. His hair had turned gray since the days he played beside Amina at the river festivals, but his hands still carried the rhythm of the earth. He said the drums that haunted Zuwara's nights were not ghosts but a call, a summons from the one they had wronged. Some called him mad, others called him brave. But when the crops continued to die and even the wells grew sour, more and more began to listen. One dawn, as the wind hummed faintly over the dunes, Bako gathered those who still believed. They were not warriors or prophets, just ordinary villagers. A weaver, a shepherd girl, 2 mothers carrying their sons, a blind potter who claimed he could hear the drumbeats clearer than any sighted man. They packed gourds of water, baskets of dried millet, and their instruments, small drums, rattles, and flutes carved from reeds. When they reached the edge of the dunes, they paused, their shadows long in the rising sun. "Do you truly think she lives?" one of the women asked. Bako lifted his drum and struck it once. The sound rolled out across the sand, low and deep. From somewhere far away, a faint echo answered, a second beat, soft but distinct. "She lives," he said simply. They began their journey. The desert swallowed them slowly, the horizon shifting like liquid gold. Days burned their skin and nights froze their bones. Yet through every hardship, the rhythm guided them, the pulse of the unseen drum that grew clearer with each step. When their strength faltered, Bako played. He would kneel on the sand and drum until the others felt the vibrations under their feet, a heartbeat rising from the earth itself. It filled them with courage, as though the desert approved of their persistence. On the 5th day, a sandstorm swept across their path. The wind roared like 1,000 spirits, tearing at their robes, filling their mouths and eyes with grit. They huddled together, covering their faces with cloth. Through the chaos, Bako heard it again, 3 distinct drumbeats cutting through the storm. The sound was not distant this time, it was all around them, woven into the wind's fury. When the storm finally passed, they found themselves standing before a wide hollow, a basin of soft sand rimmed with scattered stones. And there, at its center, sat a woman. Mina. She was alive. Her skin gleamed like bronze beneath the sun, her eyes bright and calm. Around her, the wind moved in gentle spirals, swirling grains of sand that seemed to shimmer like golden dust. She was not dressed as a queen nor as a beggar but as something in between, a wanderer crowned by the elements. A drum rested across her knees, and with every slow beat of her hands, the dunes seemed to breathe in rhythm. The villagers fell to their knees, overcome with awe. Some wept openly. Bako was the first to rise and approach her. "We followed your song," he said hoarsely. "The winds carried it to us. The people are lost without you." Amina looked at him with warmth that seemed to dissolve the years of exile. "I am not lost," she said softly. "The desert does not lose what it remembers." She motioned for them to sit. The air felt alive around her, charged but peaceful, as though the entire desert listened. "The desert remembers kindness, not cruelty," she told them. "It buries cruelty beneath silence, but kindness it preserves, even in grains of sand." Her words sank deep into their hearts. Then she began to play. The rhythm she drummed was unlike any song they had heard before, slow, steady, and infinite, like the turning of the earth itself. Each beat seemed to ripple through the dunes, stirring faint whispers that answered her from every direction. The villagers joined in hesitantly, tapping their drums, clapping their hands, letting their bodies move with the pulse of the sand. As they played, something miraculous happened. The dunes around them shifted, revealing the faint outlines of ancient carvings, symbols of forgotten queens and healers, etched long ago and now brought to light by the vibration of the sound. Amina smiled. "This is the song of return," she said. "It calls what was lost back to the living world, the names, the memories, the truth. The desert remembers, and through us, it will speak again." They played until the sun set, their music echoing across the endless horizon. That night, the wind carried their rhythm far and wide. Back in Zawara, those who dared to listen heard it and felt a stirring in their souls, a call not of fear but of forgiveness. When dawn broke, the pilgrims of the dunes rose renewed. They no longer felt like wanderers but witnesses. The desert had chosen them as its messengers. And as they began their journey back, the wind followed, whispering through the dunes in time with their steps. "Mina, Mina," you said. The palace of Zawara had grown quieter with each passing night, though silence no longer brought peace. The air inside its marble halls had changed. It trembled as if even the stones could feel the unease of their queen. Servants avoided looking at her, for Mother Nyara's once commanding gaze had turned wild, flickering like a torch in the wind. Her eyes darted to corners, to shadows, to the glint of water in her cup. Everywhere she looked, she heard it. Mina. At first, it had been faint, a whisper in the fountains, a murmur in the silk curtains. She thought it the wind. But soon, the sound followed her into her chambers, into her meals, even into her sleep. The name curled through her dreams and woke her drenched in sweat. One morning, when her maid poured water into a basin, the rippling surface shaped itself into a face. Amina's face, calm, unblinking. Nyara had screamed and struck the bowl to the floor, but the name had lingered in her ears long after the water soaked the rugs. Her priest tried to calm her. "It is only guilt, my queen. The desert plays tricks on weak minds." "Then why does it whisper my name?" she snapped. "Why not yours?" No one answered. At night, the winds from the west carried faint drumbeats into the city. The people gathered in secret to listen, whispering Amina's name like a prayer. The queen ordered the guards to arrest anyone caught speaking it, but even in chains the prisoners smiled, murmuring, "She has returned." Nyara's reflection became her torment. Every polished surface betrayed her. The mirrors in her chamber no longer showed her crown, they showed her surrounded by sand, drowning in it. When she smashed them, she found her own eyes staring back from the shards, filled with desert light. One night, as she dined alone, she heard her spoon clink softly in the bowl. The sound formed a rhythm, 3 steady beats. She froze. Slowly, the stew's surface began to ripple, and again the whisper came, soft but distinct. "Mina." Nyara screamed. "Enough. Enough of her." She flung the bowl aside, splattering the floor, and stormed to the balcony where the moonlight burned over the dunes. Far in the distance, a faint glow pulsed where the desert began, as though the earth itself was breathing. The queen's madness broke then. She cast aside her golden slippers and walked into the night barefoot, her silk gown dragging behind her like a trail of remorse. No guards followed, none dared. She passed through the empty streets, through the city gates, and into the whispering sands. The desert greeted her not with silence but with memory. As she walked, the dunes shifted beneath her feet, revealing shapes, faces half buried in the sand. One by one they emerged, the healer she had executed years ago, the servant she had punished unjustly, the friend she had betrayed to climb the throne. Their eyes opened as she passed, hollow but knowing. The wind carried their voices. "We remember." Nyara stumbled backward, clutching her chest. The faces faded, but the whisper continued, circling her like a chant. She crested a dune, and there, upon a throne carved from the very sands, sat Amina. The wind curved around her gently, like loyal servants awaiting command. Her drum rested beside her knee, silent but glowing faintly in the moonlight. Nyara fell to her knees, trembling. "You live," she rasped. "After all I did, you live." Amina regarded her with calm eyes. "The desert remembers the living," she said quietly. "You buried yourself long ago." "I came for forgiveness," Nyara whispered. "I cannot sleep. I cannot think. The air turns against me, the mirrors mock me. And it, Amina. And it." Amina's gaze softened for a moment, then turned to the wind. "Forgiveness belongs to the living," she said. "And you," her voice deepened, echoing with the force of the dunes, "you chose your grave the day you silenced truth." The ground trembled. The wind howled into a roar. The sand rose in spirals around them, furious and alive. Nyara screamed as the storm gathered, clawing at the air. Her crown slipped from her head and rolled into the dust. "Please," she cried. "I am your queen." The sand swallowed her words, then swallowed her whole. The storm rose high, then collapsed in silence. When the wind settled, the dunes smoothed over once more. Only the crown remained, half buried, glinting faintly beneath the moon. Amina stood, the wind quiet now, her face serene. She lifted her drum and struck it once. The sound rippled through the desert like a sigh, and the name Nyara dissolved into the air, remembered but no longer feared. The queen of Zawara had fallen, and the desert had taken its due. The palace of Zawara had grown quieter with each passing night, though silence no longer brought peace. The air inside its marble halls had changed. It trembled as if even the stones could feel the unease of their queen. Servants avoided looking at her, for Mother Nyara's once commanding gaze had turned wild, flickering like a torch in the wind. Her eyes darted to corners, to shadows, to the glint of water in her cup. Everywhere she looked, she heard it. Mina. At first, it had been faint, a whisper in the fountains, a murmur in the silk curtains. She thought it the wind. But soon, the sound followed her into her chambers, into her meals, even into her sleep. The name curled through her dreams and woke her drenched in sweat. One morning, when her maid poured water into a basin, the rippling surface shaped itself into a face. Amina's face, calm, unblinking. Nyara had screamed and struck the bowl to the floor, but the name had lingered in her ears long after the water soaked the rugs. Her priest tried to calm her. "It is only guilt, my queen. The desert plays tricks on weak minds." "Then why does it whisper my name?" she snapped. "Why not yours?" No one answered. At night, the winds from the west carried faint drumbeats into the city. The people gathered in secret to listen, whispering Amina's name like a prayer. The queen ordered the guards to arrest anyone caught speaking it, but even in chains the prisoners smiled, murmuring, "She has returned." Nyara's reflection became her torment. Every polished surface betrayed her. The mirrors in her chamber no longer showed her crown, they showed her surrounded by sand, drowning in it. When she smashed them, she found her own eyes staring back from the shards, filled with desert light. One night, as she dined alone, she heard her spoon clink softly in the bowl. The sound formed a rhythm, 3 steady beats. She froze. Slowly, the stew's surface began to ripple, and again the whisper came, soft but distinct. "Mina." Nyara screamed. "Enough. Enough of her." She flung the bowl aside, splattering the floor, and stormed to the balcony where the moonlight burned over the dunes. Far in the distance, a faint glow pulsed where the desert began, as though the earth itself was breathing. The queen's madness broke then. She cast aside her golden slippers and walked into the night barefoot, her silk gown dragging behind her like a trail of remorse. No guards followed, none dared. She passed through the empty streets, through the city gates, and into the whispering sands. The desert greeted her not with silence but with memory. As she walked, the dunes shifted beneath her feet, revealing shapes, faces half buried in the sand. One by one they emerged, the healer she had executed years ago, the servant she had punished unjustly, the friend she had betrayed to climb the throne. Their eyes opened as she passed, hollow but knowing. The wind carried their voices. "We remember." Nyara stumbled backward, clutching her chest. The faces faded, but the whisper continued, circling her like a chant. She crested a dune, and there, upon a throne carved from the very sands, sat Amina. The wind curved around her gently, like loyal servants awaiting command. Her drum rested beside her knee, silent but glowing faintly in the moonlight. Nyara fell to her knees, trembling. "You live," she rasped. "After all I did, you live." Amina regarded her with calm eyes. The desert remembers the living, she said quietly. You buried yourself long ago. I came for forgiveness, Nyara whispered. I cannot sleep. I cannot think. The air turns against me, the mirrors mock me. And it, Amina. And it. Amina's gaze softened for a moment, then turned to the wind. Forgiveness belongs to the living, she said. And you, her voice deepened, echoing with the force of the dunes, you chose your grave the day you silenced truth. The ground trembled. The wind howled into a roar. The sand rose in spirals around them, furious and alive. Nyara screamed as the storm gathered, clawing at the air. Her crown slipped from her head and rolled into the dust. Please, she cried. I am your queen. The sand swallowed her words, then swallowed her whole. The storm rose high, then collapsed in silence. When the wind settled, the dunes smoothed over once more. Only the crown remained, half buried, glinting faintly beneath the moon. Amina stood, the wind quiet now, her face serene. She lifted her drum and struck it once. The sound rippled through the desert like a sigh, and the name Nyara dissolved into the air, remembered but no longer feared. The queen of Zawara had fallen, and the desert had taken its due. Years passed, and the kingdom of Zawara changed like the tides of the wind. The palace that once trembled under the weight of fear now stood open to the people. The markets thrived again, the wells ran sweet, and laughter once more echoed through the palm-lined streets. Where jealousy and suspicion had once ruled, stories and songs had taken their place. Each month, when the moon ripened into a full white circle, the people would leave their homes and walk toward the desert's edge. There, under the pale glow, they gathered in silence, the elders sitting cross-legged on woven mats, the children clutching small drums carved from hollow gourds. They faced the dunes where the wind never stopped moving, never stopped breathing. Then, as the moon reached its height, the air would begin to hum. A low, melodic vibration would drift from the sands, faint at first, like the heartbeat of the earth. The people would lean forward, listening. And from that hum would rise the familiar rhythm, 3 gentle beats, followed by a pause and then another 3. The rhythm of Amina's drum. No one spoke when it began. They simply closed their eyes and let the sound fill them, the way one might receive a blessing. For they knew the story well, how the young healer, cast out into exile, had become the voice of the desert itself. Parents told their children, she was not punished. She was transformed. And the children, staring wide-eyed at the moon, would imagine her walking across the dunes, her robes fluttering, her footprints blooming into flowers behind her. Travelers, too, learned to trust the legend. Caravans crossing the sands of Koma swore that, when they lost their way, a cool wind would rise and guide them toward hidden water. Some said they heard her voice among the gusts, a woman's whisper, calm and sure, saying, "Follow the rhythm and you will live." Even the priests of Zawara, once fearful of her power, now recited her name in their prayers. Amina of the wind, they said, guardian of the lost, keeper of memory. Her story was no longer one of punishment but of mercy, of how truth cannot be buried by envy, and how the desert, once feared, became a cradle of forgiveness. Generations came and went. The shrines along the whispering sands grew weathered by time, their clay edges softened by wind and sun. But each one still held a drum hung from a wooden post. And whenever the wind blew through the hollow frames, they sang. On nights of strong desert wind, the songs reached the city itself. Doors would rattle, torches would flicker, and the people would smile. They no longer feared the voice in the air, they greeted it. Mothers would hush their children and say, "Listen, Amina is passing." And far across the dunes, the sands would shimmer as though alive, moving in slow waves that mirrored breath. The desert, once a place of exile, had become sacred ground, a living testament to the woman who taught it to speak, to remember, to forgive. And so, with every full moon, the people of Zawara gathered and lifted their hands to the wind, whispering her name not as mourning but as prayer. "Amina, guide us." The desert answered as it always had, with the gentlest of songs. A breath, a whisper, a promise carried forever on the wind.